Brian Seltzer from the Sixers Radio Network, Sixers.com. You hear him during pre- and post-game right here on 97.3 ESPN. He is in Chicago, where the Sixers are looking at a variety of players, I guess you could say, Brian, because they've got so many possible picks. They got to do their due diligence with just about everybody there.
Mike, there's no question about it, but one thing is pretty clear in just talking to some of the prospects, either those that were involved in scrimmaging and on-court activities or some that just attended here and didn't go through that. The Sixers definitely, as you would expect, very diligent, very thorough, talking to a lot of guys. They met with Brandon Ingram earlier in the week, even though Ingram did not take part in any on-court drills. Chris Dunn, another big name from this week that was out here, he didn't go through drills, but he said he met with 76ers on Wednesday. Buddy Hield, another non-participant but attendee. And one of the things that stood out, a lot of these guys just try to show their personality and character in these interviews. The Sixers, one thing that differentiated their interview based upon what some of these prospects have said is that they actually asked the players to try and draw up different plays, and they asked them to go through it. So it's something that, the Sixers have tried, it sounds like, to do a little bit different in their interviews.
Yeah, I saw Wade Baldwin talking about that in the Sixers video at the Sixers on Twitter. And, of course, Baldwin is an interesting guy. He's a point guard. Chris Dunn, a point guard there. And I guess those type of players could come into play. Baldwin maybe with the Thunder or Miami pick. Dunn possibly with that Laker pick there. Brian Colangelo speaking today kind of gave some indication that if they got the Laker pick, they would be open to dealing making some moves there. What are some of the things that stood out from Colangelo, who picked first with Toronto back in 2006?
Well, the biggest thing, it really seems like even though Brian has been through plenty of combines and draft scouting opportunities in the past in 18 years between the Suns and the Raptors, he really does seem to be enjoying the opportunity to be back in the gym here at the Quest Multi-Sport Center, interacting with a lot of his peers that are some of the top decision makers in the NBA. It's kind of a pretty amazing scene if you're a real hardcore fan of NBA basketball, because you've got this gym, which is 65,000 square feet in size. There's probably about, a couple hundred to 1,000 people in there. You've got all the top executives and coaches for the most part, as long as their teams aren't in the playoffs, mingling, interacting with each other. And what Brian Colangelo said about an hour ago is that regardless of what conversation it is you have or what's it about, it starts to begin the fact-finding process. So it's been a really invaluable experience. Brian said it's been great to be back in the fold and have this opportunity.
Yeah, now they kind of got into this situation, and then Henke abruptly left here. Did they feel like they've kind of rushed into this process? They just hired a couple of more people for front office positions, within the last week or so, Brian. There's a lot of guys just getting their feet wet in this process, which is a very tumultuous, long, drawn-out process here. Do they feel like they're well prepared?
Totally. I asked Brian that very question when he spoke this afternoon. He said that he feels like the Sixers, for the most part, kept the core of their front office in place and then bolstered it with a couple recent additions, most notably new vice president of player personnel, Mark Eversley, who spent the last 3 seasons with the Wizards in the same role. So he's been going through the process of preparing for drafts, whether he was going to stay with Washington or now in his new role with the Sixers. He's very familiar. He's been caught up to speed. Brian himself was doing research on prospects last year when he was not, again, inside the game with the team officially, went to NCAA events, went overseas several times. So Brian said flat out the Sixers totally feel prepared with a very augmented and bolstered front office that they've added to over the last 2 weeks.
I know they won't find out where they pick until Tuesday night, and 1 or 2 is where a lot of people think the draft is. If you're not 1 or 2, then you're kind of lost in the woods. Brian, what would you say to that if you ended up with 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range, if you weren't one of those top 2 spots on Tuesday night?
Biggest thing is, and this is something that Colangelo has emphasized a lot, the Sixers have flexibility, whether it's with the total number of draft picks they have financially, and they feel confident that with that type of flexibility, they're going to be able to make something happen. There's no question that Ben Simmons, who did not come out here to Chicago at all, and Brandon Ingram are considered the top 2 guys, and not necessarily in that order. There's the sense within the Sixers, I think, just my impression, that it's like, all right, last 3 years, we have the third pick, which could turn out great when it's all said and done if everyone can stay healthy and be productive. But this year, just trying to see if they can get inside those top 2 picks.
Yeah, and, you look at the back end of the draft where they have 2 picks as well. You're getting a chance to see a lot of these guys. Are there some intriguing prospects for the bottom end of this draft?
And I went through this earlier today, I think the only 2 projected first-round picks that are taking part in scrimmages is one, DeAndre Bembry. He was, very aggressive yesterday, played very well, scored 18 points. I believe he's about to go out there as part of the second scrimmage group this afternoon. And then McCall from UNLV, who's regarded as a shooting guard, lanky. He's also projected to go in the first round. And after that, there's a bunch of mid to back end second-round selections or potential undrafted free agents that are here trying to show their stuff. So I think those are the guys that have the most to gain. The higher-regarded picks, their main function here is just to go through some of these interviews and give teams a better sense of what their background is.
Brian Seltzer, Sixers.com in Chicago. Brian, you've been around the team for the last couple of years through a lot of this process. Do you get a different sense around them during this draft process and just in the sense that things are moving in a different direction at all?
There's no question that the Sixers have emphasized accelerating their method of team building going into this offseason. And who knows, regardless of who is here, whether it's front office people, coaches, or players, kind of got the vibe that this year was going to be a turning point offseason based upon what had gone on the last 3 years, what the Sixers had financially available to them. So it did seem like that was going to be the emphasis going into the 2016 spring and summer regardless. So I think that right now, whether it's in media availabilities, regardless of who's talking, whether they're talking with prospects, that seems to be the emphasis and point of focus.
I'll ask you because, as we said, you're around the team a lot, and Joel Embiid is the big wild card here. How much did you see of him during the course of the year, and how far along do you think he is?
Well, based upon the work he was doing on the court towards the end of the season, I mean, listen, you can see the potential there. Brett Brown talked about that a lot. He oversaw a workout with Joel just last week. So it sounds like things continue to be moving in a really good direction on that front. It's still unclear whether or not he's going to take part in either of the 2 summer leagues in Utah or Las Vegas. Last we heard, that didn't seem all too likely. But that's something the Sixers will probably have to decide within the coming weeks.
Well, he is a guy that everybody will have their eyes on. Everybody that likes the draft should be watching the NBA Draft Combine stuff, and Brian Seltzer at Sixers.com has plenty more as the Sixers will find out their fate on Tuesday night. Brian, we thank you for your time, pal.
Hey, thanks, man. Have a good weekend.